Number 1. Good evening, and welcome to Intervlog, where we take a closer look at the major political currents shaping Africa today. Tonight, we turn our lens to Cameroon, a nation once described as a pillar of Central African stability, but now standing at the edge of political uncertainty after the presidential election of October 12, 2025. In recent days, Cameroon has been pulled between two competing narratives, one claiming a people's victory, the other defending institutional legitimacy. The atmosphere is tense, emotions are raw, and the future, though uncertain, feels consequential not just for Cameroon, but for the region as a whole. The election took place under heavy scrutiny. Shortly after ballots were cast, Issa Tchiroma Bakary, leader of the Front pour le Salut National du Cameroun, FSNC, declared that he had won an overwhelming victory. Bakary's supporters insist that the results collated from polling stations across the country and abroad confirm this, but his refusal to submit an appeal to the Constitutional Council has stirred debate. His ally, Emmanuel Sim, speaking on Radio Balaf, asked rhetorically, "To do what?" A statement implying mistrust in the Council's impartiality. This declaration was not made in a vacuum. The Constitutional Council, though constitutionally empowered to validate results, has long faced criticism from segments of the opposition, notably the MRC, for perceived bias toward the incumbent, President Paul Biya. Bakary's camp insists that legitimacy does not come from legal arbitration, but from the conviction of the people. It is, at its core, a moral argument that the street, not the statute, defines sovereignty. Meanwhile, the government and official institutions have maintained a consistent message that only Elections Cameroon, ELECAM, and the Constitutional Council have the mandate to proclaim results. This position, while legalistic, speaks to a deeper philosophy that order must precede interpretation. And yet, many in the opposition see it differently. They argue that institutions are only credible when trusted, and that trust in Cameroon's institutions has eroded over time. This is not just a question of legality, it is one of public psychology, a contest between the form of democracy and its substance. Quand le tam-tam change de rythme, le danseur doit changer de pas. When the drumbeat changes, the dancer must change his steps. In English, it means that when the rhythm of society evolves, its institutions must adapt as well. Cameroon's drumbeat is indeed changing. A new generation, a restless electorate, and a digital public that demands accountability in real time. Whether its institutions can adjust their steps will determine the tempo of its stability. Across Cameroon, reactions have been mixed, from pride and hope in opposition strongholds to caution and anxiety in pro-government regions. As of October 15th, 10 appeals had been filed before the Constitutional Council by parties including the PCRN, SDF, and UDC, each contesting aspects of the vote and calling for annulments. At the same time, the National Commission for Final Counting has been formally constituted, comprising representatives of the judiciary, administration, and candidates. Procedurally, Cameroon's democracy is moving. Substantively, however, many fear it is stalling. The law is at work, but belief in the law is fading, and that is where the danger lies. Various civil society groups and election observers have appealed to the government to protect the will of the people. They warn that tampering with the result, or even the perception of tampering, could unravel decades of fragile stability. They note that preventive diplomacy now will be far less costly than regional crisis management later. The message is subtle but firm. Cameroon stands at a defining crossroads, and how its leaders act in the coming days may determine its next decade. This is not just about power, it is about preserving the nation's social fabric. Le feu qu'on néglige brûle la case. The fire you ignore eventually burns the house. In English, this means small signs of unrest, small grievances, can consume the very structure that shelters everyone. Cameroon's protests, its online anger, its distrust, may appear minor sparks, but left unattended, they can ignite national disunity. That imagery became literal this week when an office of the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, CPDM, in the western city of Dishang was set on fire. The footage spread rapidly across social media, symbolizing both rage and desperation. The party's Secretary General, Jean Nkwete, condemned the act and announced legal proceedings. Authorities moved swiftly, but it was symbolic. It reflected a population on edge. In Douala, Cameroon's economic capital, small protests broke out. Barricades appeared, roads were blocked, and the police responded with tear gas and water cannons. Cameroon's political narrative is shaped by continuity. President Paul Biya, now 92, has ruled since 1982, over half his lifetime. He is Africa's oldest sitting president and one of its longest serving. During his rule, Cameroon has faced insurgencies, secessionist movements, and corruption scandals, yet has largely avoided the civil wars that engulfed its neighbors. That history of stability, however, has often come at the cost of political renewal. The 2008 constitutional amendment removing presidential term limits sparked protests that left dozens. The 2018 election was contested amid allegations of fraud and repression. Now, in 2025, the question is not only who wins, but whether the system can still command legitimacy. On ne change pas la rivière en un jour. You don't change the course of a river in one day. In English, it means deep systems cannot be transformed instantly. Even if change comes through leadership turnover or institutional reform, it must be carefully guided to avoid flooding the banks of order. Issa Tchiroma Bakary's stance is defiant, yet calculated. Once a close ally of Biya and even a government minister, he has positioned himself as the candidate of transition, neither radical nor establishment, but presenting himself as a bridge. His refusal to appeal to the Constitutional Council signals a deliberate political strategy, to frame the council as part of the problem, not the solution. For his supporters, it strengthens his image as the people's choice. For his critics, it undermines due process. The balance between protest and procedure now defines Bakari's political credibility. From the government side, the response has been firm. Two communiques from Minister of Territorial Administration Paul Atanga Nji condemned Bakari's self-proclamation as irresponsible, arrogant, and illegal. Citing Article 137 of the Electoral Code, he reminded the public that only ELECAM and the Constitutional Council may declare results. This legal argument has historical weight, but in the court of public opinion, the issue is not just law, it is trust. Quand la poussière se lève, on ne distingue plus les traces du lion. When the dust rises, you can no longer see the lion's footprints. This means that when confusion dominates, through misinformation, accusation, and rumor, truth becomes obscured. In this digital era, where every smartphone becomes a newsroom, clarity is easily lost. That is why independent journalism, calm analysis, and restraint are so vital now. Months before the election, several independent analyses foresaw this moment. Reports from Jeune Afrique, the Atlantic Council, and the U.S. Congressional Research Service all warned of an impending legitimacy crisis if electoral transparency was questioned. Their conclusions were consistent. Without a credible mechanism for succession, Cameroon's stability could fracture, threatening regional trade, security, and energy routes. The Chad-Cameroon pipeline, for example, is not merely an economic project. It is a lifeline connecting economies. If unrest deepens, its operations, and with it, revenue for multiple states, could be affected. Cameroon's ports in Douala and Kribi, vital for Chad, the Central African Republic, and Congo, could see paralysis. Thus, Cameroon's political crisis carries regional consequences far beyond its borders. Même le plus grand baobab a commencé par une graine. Even the tallest baobab began as a seed. In English, it reminds us that every crisis, no matter how large, begins as a small event, a decision, a silence, an ignored warning. The seeds of Cameroon's current tension were sown years ago in unaddressed grievances, delayed reforms, and the centralization of power. As of now, 3 potential outcomes lie ahead. Validation of the incumbent's victory. This would maintain formal continuity, but likely intensify public discontent, potentially triggering more protests. Partial annulment or rerun. This could offer a compromise but would depend on logistical feasibility and political will. Recognition of Bakari's victory. Unlikely given institutional precedent, but if it occurred, it would require a carefully negotiated transition to avoid state paralysis. Each scenario carries its own risks. The scenario of all is indecision, where results linger in limbo, and uncertainty becomes policy. Cameroon's stability underpins the CEMAC economic zone. A breakdown would ripple through Central Africa, disrupting supply chains, trade, and investment confidence. Neighboring states like Chad and Congo depend on Cameroonian ports and pipelines. A prolonged crisis could undermine the entire region's fiscal health. That is why analysts and diplomats are urging restraint, not intervention. As one regional observer put it, Cameroon's peace is Central Africa's spine. La palabre n'est pas la guerre. Dialogue is not war. This means that argument, debate, and disagreement are not necessarily destruction. If Cameroonians can keep their disagreements within dialogue, their democracy, however imperfect, still breathes. Amid the politics, it is easy to forget the people. For ordinary Cameroonians, the issue is not who sits in Yaoundé, but whether life improves, whether schools stay open, whether markets function, whether peace endures. For them, the priority is certainty. And certainty, in this moment, feels elusive. In the streets of Douala, Yaoundé, and Garoua, people speak in hushed tones about what comes next. They have seen elections before. They have also seen promises fade. This time, many simply hope the system does not collapse under its own contradictions. The role of the press is crucial. In moments like this, journalism is not about choosing sides. It is about illuminating complexity. The proliferation of social media has democratized information, but it has also amplified distortion. As one observer noted, when everyone speaks, truth must learn to shout. And yet, truth rarely shouts, it whispers. It requires listening. French parable Sept. Quand le coq chante trop tôt, il réveille le serpent. When the rooster crows too early, it wakes the serpent. Meaning, premature celebration or declaration can provoke forces not yet ready to sleep. Bakari's early victory speech, while energizing for supporters, may have awakened institutional resistance and deepened polarization. So far, the international community has reacted with restraint. Governments and multilateral institutions have urged calm and respect for due process. No one wants to be seen as interfering in Cameroon's internal affairs, yet no one can ignore the potential regional fallout. Diplomatic circles speak quietly of preventive engagement, discreet conversations, not open condemnations. Mieux vaut réparer la jarre avant qu'elle ne se casse. It is better to mend the clay pot before it breaks. Translated politically, early mediation is far cheaper than post-crisis reconstruction. Cameroon's leadership question. At 92, Paul Biya remains an enigma, present yet distant, visible yet silent. His age has become a metaphor for the political system, resilient but weary. Many Cameroonians quietly wonder who comes next and when. Bakari's challenge, though disputed, has reopened that conversation. Even if he does not win, he may have already forced a reckoning about succession, renewal, and the limits of continuity. Quand on veut aller loin, il faut ménager sa monture. If you wish to go far, you must care for your horse. Meaning, endurance requires moderation. Cameroon's path forward must be paced, neither rushed into confrontation nor delayed into decay. Whatever the outcome of this election, three things are clear. The Cameroonian electorate has changed, more informed, more connected, less patient. The institutions must evolve. Independence must be proven, not declared. And leadership renewal is no longer optional. It is inevitable. If managed well, this election could mark the beginning of a generational transition. If mismanaged, it could deepen cynicism and fracture the fragile peace Cameroon has long maintained. Quand deux éléphants se battent, c'est l'herbe qui souffre. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Meaning, in political battles, ordinary citizens bear the pain. That truth must guide both sides now. Victory without peace is defeat in disguise. Cameroon stands today between history and destiny. The question is not only who governs, but how the governed consent to be led. Legitimacy is not a certificate. It is a relationship between rulers and ruled, between institutions and citizens, between hope and memory. In the coming days, the Constitutional Council will declare the official result. That moment, however brief, will not end the story. It will begin a new chapter. How Cameroon writes that chapter will depend on the wisdom of its leaders, the patience of its citizens, and the honesty of its institutions. Final French parable: Le vent ne casse pas l'arbre qui plie. The wind does not break the tree that bends. In English, flexibility is strength. If Cameroon can bend, through dialogue, through humility, through reform, it will not break. Closing statement. For now, the world watches a proud nation navigating uncertainty. Cameroon has overcome greater storms before: colonization, conflict, crisis, and it can do so again. But this time the test is internal: whether power can yield to principle, and whether democracy can prove itself not just as an event, but as a habit. From Yaoundé to Douala, from Biya to Marua, Cameroonians await clarity. And clarity, when it comes, will not only decide who leads, it will reveal what kind of country Cameroon chooses to become. This is the end of our program today. See you on Inner Vlog, same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates. Thank you for watching Intervlog. Thank you.